Somewhere between the canyon ridges and the endless scrubland, where the wind carried dust instead of rain, a man found something he wasn't looking for. Corbin Thorne walked toward his well that afternoon and saw her collapsed against the wooden fence. A young woman, taller than any he'd seen, her dark hair matted with dirt and blood. She wore deerskin and beadwork that marked her as Apache. Her lips were cracked white. When he offered the ladle of water, she looked at him with eyes that held more suspicion than gratitude. But she drank. 3 times she drank. And when she was done, she stood, towering, silent, and stared at him as if memorizing his face. Then she turned and walked into the hills without a single word. Corbin watched her disappear into the heat shimmer, thinking that would be the end of it. He was wrong. Corbin Thorne had lived on this land long enough to know when something was about to go wrong. The ranch sat in a shallow valley where the grass grew thin, and the nearest neighbor was 2 days' ride south. He'd chosen isolation on purpose. No questions, no trouble, just cattle, a few horses, and the kind of silence that let a man forget what he'd left behind. He wasn't running from anything in particular, just the noise of people who thought they knew better than they did. That evening, after the Apache girl had vanished into the hills, Corbin went about his work the same as always. He fed the horses, checked the fence line where the wood had started to rot, fixed a gate hinge that had been squeaking for weeks. But his mind kept circling back to her, the way she'd looked at him, not afraid, not grateful either, just aware, like she'd been taking his measure and decided something he wasn't privy to. He told himself it didn't matter. People pass through this territory all the time, prospectors, drifters, natives heading to or from trading posts further west. She'd gotten lost, gotten hurt, and now she was gone. That was that. But that night, lying on the narrow cot in his cabin, Corbin couldn't shake the feeling that the air had changed. The horses were restless. He could hear them shifting in the corral, their hooves scraping dirt. Once, the bay gelding let out a sharp whinny that cut through the dark. Corbin sat up listening. Nothing followed. Just the wind pushing against the walls and the distant call of something hunting in the hills. He lay back down, staring at the rough beams of the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd ride out to the north pasture and check on the herd. Tomorrow, everything would go back to normal. He was still telling himself that when the sun rose. Corbin stepped outside at first light, pulling his suspenders over his shoulders and squinting against the glare. The sky was clear, pale blue fading into white at the edges. The valley stretched out in front of him, scrubgrass and rock formations dotting the landscape, and then he saw them. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks, shadows on the ridgeline. But shadows didn't move like that. Shadows didn't sit on horseback in perfect stillness, watching. He counted 10, then 20, then stopped counting. They lined the ridge to the north, the hillside to the east, the slope that ran down to the dry creek bed on the west. Everywhere he looked, there were more, Apache warriors on horseback, spears and rifles visible even from this distance. They weren't advancing, they weren't making noise. They were just there, surrounding his ranch like a noose pulled tight. Corbin's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the doorframe, but he stopped himself. What good would one rifle do against an army? He stepped into the yard, boots crunching on the hard-packed dirt. The horses in the corral were pressed against the far fence, heads high, nostrils flared. They could smell it too. Danger. Corbin scanned the ridgeline again, trying to understand what he was seeing. This wasn't a raid. Raiders moved fast, struck hard, and disappeared. This was something else. This was deliberate. This was a message. But what message? His throat tightened. He thought about the girl, the water, the way she'd looked at him before she left. And then, as if summoned by the thought, movement caught his eye. A single rider broke from the group on the northern ridge and began descending the slope. Slow, controlled. The horse picked its way down the rocky incline with the kind of precision that came from a rider who'd been born in the saddle. Corbin didn't move, didn't reach for the rifle, didn't run. He just stood there in the middle of his yard watching the rider approach, wondering if this was the day he'd finally run out of luck. The rider stopped 50 feet away. A man, older, his face lined with years of sun and wind and something harder, command. He wore no war paint, but he didn't need it. Authority radiated from him like heat from stone. Behind him, more riders appeared, dozens of them, flanking, watching. Corbin swallowed hard. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. And then the old warrior raised one hand, not in greeting, not in threat, Just raised it, held it there, waiting for something Corbin couldn't name. His heart hammered against his ribs. Whatever was about to happen, it had already been decided long before he woke up this morning. The question was, had he just saved his own life yesterday, or signed his death warrant? The hand stayed raised. Corbin's pulse hammered in his ears. He'd heard stories about Apache warriors, how they could strip a man down to bone in minutes, how they fought with a ferocity that made grown soldiers weep. He'd always figured those stories were exaggerations. Now standing in his own yard with an army watching him from every direction, he wasn't so sure. The old warrior lowered his hand slowly. Then he dismounted. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. He walked forward 10 paces and stopped. Waiting. Corbin forced himself to breathe. This was a test. Had to be. If they wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. They'd had all night to burn him out, or put an arrow through his window. Instead, they'd waited for sunrise, waited for him to see them. That meant something. He stepped forward, matching the distance. 10 paces. Then he stopped too. They stood facing each other across 50 feet of dusty ground. The warrior's face was weathered like old leather, his eyes black and unreadable. Gray streaked his long hair. He carried no weapon in his hands, but a knife hung at his belt and a rifle was strapped to his horse. Corbin kept his hands visible at his sides, non-threatening. He didn't speak, didn't know what to say even if he tried. The language barrier was absolute. For a long moment, nothing happened. The warriors on the ridges remained still as stone. The horses shifted weight. A hawk circled overhead, oblivious to the tension below. Then the old warrior raised his hand again. But this time, he pointed, not at Corbin, at the well. Corbin's stomach dropped. The well, the water, the girl. The warrior lowered his hand and made a gesture, pouring water, drinking. The meaning was clear. Corbin nodded slowly. Yes, he'd given water to someone. The girl. Yesterday. The warrior's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He turned his head slightly and called out something in his own language. Sharp, commanding. Movement rippled through the warriors. They parted on the eastern ridge, creating a gap, and through that gap a single rider appeared. Corbin's breath caught. It was her, the girl from yesterday, but she looked different now. Her hair was braided and decorated with beads. She wore clean deerskin and a necklace of turquoise and silver. She sat straight-backed on a painted horse, and even from this distance, her height was striking. She had to be close to 6 feet tall, maybe more. No wonder the title said giant. She stood out even among the warriors. She rode down the slope with the same controlled grace as the old warrior. When she reached the valley floor, she didn't stop at a distance like he had. She rode straight to him, stopped 10 feet away, close enough that Corbin could see her face clearly. She looked at him with the same measuring gaze as before. Then she spoke. Her English was halting but clear. You give water. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an acknowledgement. Corbin nodded. Yes. She glanced at the old warrior, then back at Corbin. You not know who. Again, not a question. Corbin shook his head. No, you were hurt, needed help. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. She turned to the old warrior and spoke rapidly in Apache. He listened without expression, then responded with a single word. The girl turned back to Corbin. My father say you brave, or fool. Corbin's throat went dry. Father. The old warrior was her father, which meant he was the chief, which meant this girl wasn't just any Apache. She was the daughter of the man who commanded 300 warriors. I didn't know, Corbin said quietly. That why you live, she replied. Her tone was flat, factual. Man who know, he try get reward. You give water because thirsty person need water. That different. The old warrior spoke again, longer this time. The girl listened, then translated. My father say I do test. Walk alone 3 days, no food, no water, prove strong, prove ready. She paused. I fall, hit head, lose path. Your water save life. Corbin felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes on him. I'm glad you're all right. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. You not afraid? I'm terrified, Corbin admitted. But shooting or running won't change anything. So I'm standing here. For the first time, something almost like amusement touched her face. She spoke to her father again. He nodded once, then turned and walked back to his horse. The girl looked at Corbin one more time. We watch. See if you speak truth or lie. See if you tell other white men where we are. See if you good or bad." "How long?" Corbin asked. She didn't answer. She just turned her horse and rode back up the slope. The old warrior mounted and followed. Corbin stood in his yard as the sun climbed higher. The warriors didn't leave. They settled into positions on the ridges, becoming part of the landscape, watching. He was a prisoner in his own home, and he had no idea how long the sentence would last. 3 days passed. The warriors remained on the ridges like sentinels carved from stone. They rotated positions but never left. Smoke from their fires rose into the sky each evening. Corbin tried to go about his work, but everything felt wrong. He fed the horses under watchful eyes. He repaired fence posts, knowing every movement was being studied. He drew water from the well, the same well where he'd found the girl, and wondered if they were counting each bucket he pulled up. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound outside jerked him awake. The horses sensed his tension and grew skittish. The bay gelding kicked at the fence until Corbin had to move him to a separate pen. On the 4th morning, Corbin woke to find something had changed. One of the warriors had come down from the ridge during the night and left something by his door, a bundle wrapped in hide. Inside, he found dried meat and a clay jar of water. He stared at it, trying to understand the message. Were they providing for him because they respected him? Or were they making sure he stayed alive long enough to complete their test? Either way, he ate the meat. It was tough and heavily salted, but it was food. His own supplies were running low, and he couldn't exactly ride to town with an army blocking every route out of the valley. By the 5th day, the isolation was wearing on him. He'd always preferred solitude, but this was different. This was being watched every waking moment. He started talking to the horses just to hear a voice, even if it was his own. On the 6th day, the girl came back. She rode down alone this time without her father. She stopped at the same spot as before, 10 feet from where Corbin stood in the yard. "You still here?" she said. "Didn't have much choice," Corbin replied. She dismounted and walked closer. Up close, her height was even more striking. She stood nearly as tall as him, and Corbin wasn't a small man. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. She studied him like she was reading a map. "You could run," she said. "At night. Take horse. Try. And get killed before I made it a mile," Corbin said. "No thanks." "You smart," she said. It sounded like a compliment, but her tone was neutral. "Most white men run, get caught, get killed, you stay, wait. What else can I do?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the well and looked down into it. "Deep," she said. "Deep enough," Corbin agreed. "Doesn't run dry even in summer. That why you live here? Good water?" "That's part of it." She turned back to him. "My people need water too. This land used to be ours. Now white men build fences, dig wells, take what was free." Corbin felt the weight of that statement. He'd bought this land legally, according to the laws written by men who'd never asked the Apache if they agreed. "I don't want trouble," he said carefully. "Trouble already here," she replied. "Question is what you do with it." Before Corbin could respond, a sound cut through the morning air. A gunshot, distant but unmistakable. Then another, then a third. The girl's head snapped toward the eastern ridge. The warriors were moving, shifting positions. More shots echoed across the valley, coming from somewhere beyond the hills. The girl spoke rapidly in Apache, calling out to the nearest warriors. One of them shouted back. Her expression hardened. She turned to Corbin. "White men coming. Many. With guns." Corbin's blood went cold. "How many?" 20. Maybe more. "They hunt." She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something other than neutrality in her eyes. It might have been calculation, or it might have been accusation. "They hunt us." The gunshots were getting closer. Whoever was out there, they were moving fast, and they were headed straight for the valley. The girl mounted her horse in one fluid motion. "They find you with us. They kill you too. They think you enemy. Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She just kicked her horse into motion and rode hard for the ridge. The warriors were already pulling back, disappearing into the hills like smoke. Corbin stood alone in his yard as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Men's voices, shouting, excited. The kind of excitement that came from men who thought they'd cornered prey. He had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived. 5 minutes to decide what he was going to say when a group of armed settlers found him standing in a valley that 300 Apache warriors had just abandoned. And he had absolutely no idea which side he was supposed to be on. They came thundering down the eastern trail like a storm breaking over the hills. Corbin counted 15 riders, maybe more behind them. They wore the rough clothes of settlers, canvas trousers, worn shirts, wide-brimmed hats stained with sweat and dust. Every man carried a rifle. Some had revolvers at their hips. They rode hard, faces flushed with the kind of heat that came from excitement and anger mixed together. The lead rider spotted Corbin standing in his yard and raised a hand to slow the group. They pulled up 30 yards from the cabin, horses breathing hard, foam white on their necks. "You alone here?" the lead rider called out. He was a broad man with a thick beard and eyes that scanned the valley constantly, looking for movement. "Just me," Corbin said. He kept his voice steady, his hands visible. "You see any Apache come through here?" Another rider pushed forward, younger, with a rifle already unslung and resting across his saddle. "We've been tracking a war party. Saw smoke signals yesterday. Trail led straight to this valley." Corbin's mind raced. He could lie. Tell them the Apache had passed through and moved on. But these men weren't fools. They'd seen the tracks, the campsites, the signs of 300 warriors settling in for days of watching. "I've seen signs," Corbin said carefully. "But they're gone now." The bearded man squinted at him. "Gone where?" "North, I think. Heard horses moving out about 20 minutes ago." It wasn't entirely a lie. The warriors had pulled back into the hills. But north was a guess, and he knew it. The young rider with the rifle looked suspicious. "You got a lot of nerve living out here alone. Apache territory." "It's my land," Corbin said. "Bought and paid for. Apache don't care about deeds and titles," the bearded man said. He dismounted and walked closer. "You're lucky they haven't killed you already." "Maybe I'm not worth killing," Corbin replied. The man laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "We're part of a volunteer militia. Been hunting a group that raided a settlement 2 weeks south, burned 3 homesteads, killed a family." He spat into the dirt. "We aim to make them pay." Corbin's stomach tightened. "You sure it was Apache?" "Tracks don't lie," the young rider said. "War party came through. We followed them here." The bearded man studied Corbin's face. "You seem awful calm for a man who just had hostiles camped on his doorstep." "Panic doesn't help anything," Corbin said. "You hiding something?" The young rider's hand tightened on his rifle. "Just trying to stay alive," Corbin said. "Same as anyone." The bearded man walked past him toward the cabin. "Mind if we look around? Get some water for the horses?" Corbin didn't have much choice. "Help yourself." The men dismounted and spread out. Some led horses to the water trough. Others walked the perimeter of the cabin, checking for tracks, for signs. The young rider stayed mounted, watching Corbin with open distrust. "You got supplies in there?" the bearded man asked, nodding toward the cabin. "Enough to get by. We could use some. Been riding for 3 days straight. Pay you fair." Corbin nodded slowly. "I'll see what I have." He walked toward the cabin with the bearded man following. As they reached the door, Corbin caught movement on the ridge to the west. Just a flicker, a shape that could have been a rock or a warrior watching from cover. The Apache hadn't left. They'd just pulled back far enough to avoid the fight. They were still out there, still watching. And if these militiamen found them, the valley was going to run red. The bearded man stepped inside the cabin. Corbin followed, his mind working through possibilities. He could tell them the truth, that the Apache weren't raiders, that they'd been here for days without causing harm. But would they believe him? Or would they think he'd been compromised, turned into a sympathizer? "You got coffee?" the bearded man asked, scanning the shelves. "Some," Corbin said. "Good. We'll take whatever you can spare." He turned to face Corbin directly. "And you're going to tell us exactly where those Apache went." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Corbin looked at the man's hard eyes and knew the moment had come. He could point north and send them chasing shadows. He could point west and lead them into an ambush. Or he could tell them the truth and risk being shot as a traitor to his own people. Outside, one of the men shouted, "Found fresh tracks. Lots of them. They ain't far." The bearded man's expression changed. His hand went to his revolver. "How long they been gone?" Corbin met his eyes. "Not long enough." The bearded man drew his revolver and stepped outside. Corbin followed, heart pounding. The militiamen were gathering near the eastern fence where the ground was soft enough to hold prints. Clear as daylight, dozens of unshod horses, moving in organized patterns. "They were here," one man said, kneeling to examine the tracks. "Been here for days by the look of it." The young rider turned his rifle toward Corbin. "You lied. They didn't just pass through. They were camped here. I said I saw signs, Corbin replied, keeping his voice level. I didn't say they attacked me. Why the hell not? The bearded man demanded. You're a white settler on their land. Why would they let you live? Corbin had one chance to navigate this right. One chance to keep these men from riding into the hills and starting a slaughter. Maybe because I didn't give them a reason to kill me. You sympathize with them? The young rider's voice was sharp with accusation. I sympathize with staying alive, Corbin said. They had 300 warriors on those ridges. If they wanted me dead, I'd be dead. They let me be, so I let them be. 300? The bearded man's face went pale. You're saying 300 Apache were surrounding this ranch? For 6 days, Corbin said, and not one of them fired a shot. The militiamen exchanged looks. The mathematics of it was clear. 15 rifles against 300 warriors wasn't bravery. It was suicide. Then why were they here? Another man asked. War parties don't just camp out for no reason. Corbin chose his words carefully. I helped someone, one of theirs. Gave her water when she needed it. They came to see what kind of man I was. Her? The young rider's eyes narrowed. You helped a squaw? The word made Corbin's jaw tighten, but he didn't rise to it. I helped a person who was hurt and thirsty, same as I'd help any of you. And they rewarded you by surrounding your ranch? The bearded man didn't sound convinced. They were watching, making sure I wasn't going to run to the nearest town and bring back an army. Corbin gestured at the militia. Looks like they were right to worry. The bearded man holstered his revolver, but kept his hand near it. We got families burned out of their homes. Children killed. You expect us to just let that go? I expect you to be sure you're hunting the right people, Corbin said. The ones who were here didn't raid anyone. They were testing me. Testing you for what? Before Corbin could answer, a sound carried across the valley. A call, high and piercing. Not human, not animal. Something in between. A signal. Every man froze. The horses shifted nervously. The call came again, echoing off the canyon walls. And this time, it was answered. From the north ridge, then the south, then the west. The valley filled with sound. Surrounding them. They're still here, the young rider whispered. His rifle shook in his hands. The bearded man scanned the ridges. Nothing visible. Just rock and scrub and shadow. But the calls kept coming. Closer now, tightening like a noose. Mount up, he ordered. We're leaving. Now. We came here to fight, one man protested. We came here to fight raiders, not 300 warriors on their own ground. The bearded man swung into his saddle. Move! The men scrambled for their horses. The young rider kept his rifle pointed at the ridges, backing toward his mount. Within seconds, they were all mounted, horses dancing with fear. The bearded man looked down at Corbin. You're a fool if you stay here. Maybe, Corbin said. But it's still my home. Won't be a home when they burn it. The man kicked his horse into motion. Let's go. They rode out fast, heading south the way they'd come. The thunder of hooves faded quickly, swallowed by the desert wind. Corbin stood alone in his yard. The calls stopped. Silence settled over the valley like dust after a storm. Then movement on the ridge. The girl appeared first, riding down on her painted horse. Behind her father. Behind him, a dozen warriors. They rode down slowly, deliberately. When they reached the valley floor, the girl dismounted and walked to Corbin. Her expression was unreadable. You not tell them where we are, she said. No. You could. They want kill us. You could make them happy. I don't want anyone killed, Corbin said. She studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and spoke to her father in Apache. The old chief listened, then looked at Corbin with those black measuring eyes. He said something brief, sharp, final. The girl translated. My father say test is over. You pass. Corbin felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. What happens now? The girl's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Now we talk. The chief dismounted and walked toward Corbin's cabin without asking permission. It wasn't aggression. It was simply the behavior of a man who'd spent his life commanding respect without needing to demand it. The girl followed, and Corbin brought up the rear, feeling oddly like a guest in his own home. Inside, the chief stood in the center of the small room, taking in the sparse furnishings, the shelves of supplies, the single window that faced west. He said something to his daughter. He say you live simple, she translated. Like warrior. No extra things. Corbin wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an observation. I don't need much. The chief pulled out a chair from the table and sat. He gestured for Corbin to do the same. The girl remained standing, positioned where she could see both men and the door. My name Nizhoni, she said, introducing herself properly for the first time. Mean beautiful in our language. White men make joke because I am tall. But my father say I'm beautiful like mountain. Strong, tall, unmovable. It's a good name, Corbin said. He looked at the chief. And your father? His name not for you to say, Nizhoni replied. Her tone wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. He is chief. That is enough. The chief spoke, his voice low and measured. Nizhoni translated in segments, letting him finish thoughts before converting them to English. You give water to me when I fall. You not ask for payment? You not ask for favor? You not try to touch me or keep me? You give what I need and let me go. She paused as her father continued. This not normal for white men. They take, they demand, they hurt. But you just give. Corbin met the chief's eyes. She needed help. That's all. My father say his test was hard test. 6 days watching. 6 days waiting to see if you run to town. If you tell soldiers where we camp. If you sell information for gold or safety. Nizhoni's voice was steady, clinical. You do none of these things. Men come with guns looking for us. You could tell them. Make them happy. Make them think you are good white man who helps kill Apache. I don't want to kill anyone, Corbin said. But you also not want die, the chief said through Nizhoni. Smart. Man who want die is useless. Man who want live, who choose how to live, this is valuable man. The chief reached into a leather pouch at his belt and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He set it on the table and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a necklace, intricate beadwork on leather with a distinctive pattern, blue and white beads arranged in a specific design. This mark of protection, Nizhoni explained. You wear this. My people know you are friend. They will not harm you. They will not take from you. You are under protection of our tribe. Corbin stared at the necklace. I don't understand. Why? Because you show honor when you not have to, Nizhoni said. Because you risk your life to not betray us. Because my father see in you something rare. White man who understand that land belong to all. That water is for thirsty. That human being is human being. The chief spoke again. Longer this time, with emphasis on certain words. Nizhoni listened carefully before translating. My father say this land once all Apache land. Water flow free. Game run free. Then white men come with paper that say they own what cannot be owned. They put up fences. They dig wells. They say this is mine, that is yours, you cannot pass here. She paused. But you are different. You have fence, yes. You have well, yes. But when person need water, you give. You do not ask if person is Apache or white, if person is Christian or not. You just give water to thirsty person. Anyone would do the same, Corbin said. No, the chief said in English. The single word carried weight. Then he continued in Apache, and Nizhoni translated. Most men would not. Most men see Apache girl and think danger, think problem, think opportunity. You see thirsty person. That is difference. The chief stood and pushed the necklace across the table toward Corbin. You take. You wear. You are protected. Corbin picked up the necklace. The beadwork was intricate, beautiful. The leather was soft and well worked. What does this mean for me? For my ranch? Nizhoni and her father exchanged a look. Then she spoke without waiting for translation. It mean you can live in peace. My people will not trouble you. We will watch over your land when you are gone. If other Apache come through, we tell them you are friend. She paused. But there is more. Corbin waited. Those white men will come back, she said. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But they will come. They want fight Apache. They want revenge for things they think we do. Her expression hardened. If you wear this, if they see it, they will think you are traitor. They will not understand. They will want hurt you too. The chief spoke one final time. Short, definite. My father say, choose carefully. Protection from us mean danger from them. You cannot have both. Corbin held the necklace in his hands, feeling the weight of the choice. It wasn't just a piece of beadwork. It was a declaration. A line drawn in the dust that he'd have to stand on one side of or the other. He thought about the militia men who'd just left. The bearded man's hard eyes. The young rider's suspicion. If they came back and found him wearing Apache symbols, they'd shoot first and ask questions later. He'd be branded a turncoat, a traitor to his own people. But what did that mean, really? His own people. White settlers who'd taken land through force and called it legal. Men who hunted human beings like animals and called it justice. Were those his people just because they shared his skin color? He looked at Nijoni. She stood tall and straight, waiting for his answer with the patience of someone who'd already accepted whatever choice he made. She'd been dying of thirst, and he'd given her water. That simple, that human. And now 300 warriors would leave him in peace because of it. Or he could refuse the necklace. Keep his distance. Try to stay neutral in a territory where neutrality was becoming impossible. Live alone, trust no one, and hope both sides left him alone. That had been his plan when he came here. Isolation, peace through distance. But the world had found him anyway, forced him to choose. Corbin put the necklace over his head. The beadwork settled against his chest, cool against his skin. I choose to live with honor, he said. Same as I've been trying to do all along. The chief's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Respect, maybe, or acknowledgement. He stood and placed one hand briefly on Corbin's shoulder, a gesture that needed no translation. Nijoni spoke to her father in Apache. He nodded and replied. She turned back to Corbin. My father say you are brave. Or stupid. Maybe both. This time she almost smiled. He also say stupid brave men sometimes become legends. I'm not looking to be a legend, Corbin said. I just want to live in peace. Peace take more courage than war, Nijoni said. Anybody can fight. Take special person to choose not fight when everyone else want blood. The chief moved toward the door. Nijoni followed but paused at the threshold. You have questions? She asked. A lot of them, Corbin admitted. But I guess they can wait. Ask one, she said. While my father is here. While words still mean something before world get complicated again. Corbin thought for a moment. That test you were doing. The 3 days alone with no food or water. Did you pass? Nijoni's expression was unreadable. I survive. That is pass. But not the way I plan. I fall. I need help. Some say that mean I fail. And what do you say? I say I learn more falling than I would staying strong. She glanced at her father. Sometimes lesson come from place you not expect. Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept help. The chief spoke from outside. A call, not harsh, but commanding. Nijoni stepped through the door. My people leave now. We go north to summer grounds. White men make it hard to stay anywhere long. Always pushing, always taking. Will you come back? Corbin asked. Maybe, if we need water. She looked back at him. If we need remind ourselves that not all white men are same. She walked to her horse and mounted in one smooth motion. The chief was already on his horse. The warriors gathered behind him. They were pulling back, leaving the valley. The siege was ending. The test was over. Corbin stood in his doorway and watched them ride out. Nijoni looked back once, raised her hand in a gesture that might have been farewell or acknowledgement. Then they were gone, disappearing into the hills like shadows at sunset. The valley fell silent, the kind of silence that felt wrong after days of being watched. Corbin touched the necklace at his chest. The beadwork was warm from his skin now, no longer cool. He was protected. He was also marked. And somewhere to the south, 15 armed men were riding back to their settlement with stories about Apache warriors in these hills. Stories that would spread. Stories that would bring more men, more guns, more trouble. The peace he'd wanted felt further away than ever. But at least now he knew where he stood. And if men came looking for war, they'd have to go through him to get it. He just hoped he'd made the right choice, because there was no taking it back now. 3 weeks passed. The valley settled into an uneasy quiet. Corbin worked his land, tended his animals, and kept the necklace visible on his chest. He didn't hide it, didn't take it off. If trouble was coming, he'd meet it on his own terms. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning. Dust rose on the southern trail. Riders, moving fast. Corbin counted 8 men this time, fewer than before but better armed. The bearded militia leader was back, and he brought reinforcements. They rode straight to the ranch and formed a half circle around the yard, rifles ready. We heard rumors, the bearded man called out. Heard a rancher out here's been trading with the enemy. His eyes locked on the necklace. Guess the rumors were true. Corbin stood his ground. I'm not trading with anyone. I'm living in peace. That's Apache beadwork, the young rider said, his voice tight with anger. You're wearing their colors. That makes you one of them. It makes me someone they won't kill, Corbin replied. Seems like a practical choice in hostile territory. It makes you a traitor, the bearded man said. He dismounted slowly, hand near his revolver. We came here to give you a chance to explain yourself, but looking at you now, I don't think there's much to explain. Corbin felt his pulse quicken but kept his voice steady. You want to know why I'm wearing this? Because I gave water to a dying girl, and it turns out her father commands 300 warriors. They tested me for 6 days. I passed. They offered protection. I accepted. That's the whole story. And you think that makes you special? The bearded man stepped closer. Think that makes you different from the rest of us trying to survive out here? No, Corbin said. I think it makes me smart. You came here hunting Apache. How many did you kill? The question hung in the air. None of the men answered. That's what I thought, Corbin continued. You rode in looking for a fight and found an army instead. You turned back because you knew you'd lose. I made a different choice. I chose not to fight at all. Coward's choice, the young rider spat. Maybe, Corbin said, but I'm alive. My ranch is standing, and I can sleep at night knowing I didn't start a war that would get good men killed on both sides. The bearded man studied him for a long moment. You really think you can stay neutral in this? I don't think I can stay neutral, Corbin said. I think I already picked a side. I picked the side that doesn't want bloodshed. If that makes me an enemy to you, then shoot me now and get it over with. He spread his arms wide, making himself an open target. The necklace hung visible on his chest, blue and white beads catching the morning sun. No one moved. The horses shifted nervously. A hawk called overhead. Finally, the bearded man shook his head. You're a damn fool, Thorn, but you're an honest one. He turned to his men. Mount up, we're wasting time here. We're just letting him go? The young rider protested. He ain't hurting anyone, the bearded man said. And if the Apache want to leave him alone, that's their business. We got real problems to deal with. Settlers getting raided. Families needing protection. This man ain't one of them problems. He swung back into his saddle and looked down at Corbin one last time. But don't expect us to come running if you need help. You made your choice. Live with it. I intend to, Corbin said. They rode out, slower this time, less aggressive. The young rider looked back once with something between anger and confusion. Then they were gone, leaving dust settling in the morning air. Corbin stood alone in his yard. The valley was empty again. No warriors on the ridges, no militia on the trails. Just him, his ranch, and the choice he'd made. He walked to the well and drew up a bucket of water. Cold, clear, untouched by the heat of the day. He poured it into the trough for the horses, watching it splash and settle. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the western hills, Corbin saw movement on the ridge. A single rider, tall and straight in the saddle. Nijoni sat watching from a distance, making sure he'd survived the confrontation. When she saw him looking, she raised one hand in acknowledgement. Then she turned her horse and disappeared into the gathering shadows. Corbin touched the necklace at his chest. It had cost him the trust of his own people, but earned him something more valuable. Genuine peace in a land where peace was rare as rain. He went inside his cabin, lit a lamp against the coming dark, and sat down to the simple meal he'd prepared. Outside, the valley stretched silent under the first stars. No armies watching, no men hunting. Just land and sky and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is choose not to fight. His ranch would stand. The water would flow. And when thirsty travelers came through, Apache or white, friend or stranger, he'd offer them a drink and let them be on their way. It wasn't much of a legacy, but it was honest. And in a territory torn by violence and fear, honesty was worth more than gold. Corbin Thorn had given water to a girl who needed it. In return, he'd found something he didn't know he was looking for, a way to live with honor in a land where honor was becoming extinct. The choice had been simple. The consequences were hard, but he'd make the same choice again if asked. That was enough. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and choices shape destinies in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means the world to us.